The Dust Bowl was the name given to the drought-stricken Southern Plains region of the United States, which suffered severe dust storms during a drought in the 1930s. As high winds and choking dust swept the region from Texas to Nebraska, people and livestock were killed and crops failed across the entire region. The Dust Bowl intensified the crushing economic impacts of the Great Depression and drove many farming families on a desperate migration in search of work and better living conditions. What caused the Dust Bowl? Federal land regulations, regional weather, farm economics, and cultural issues caused the Dust Bowl. After the Civil War, government land statutes encouraged Great Plains cultivation, drawing pioneers west. The Homestead Act of 1862 gave settlers 160 acres of public land. The Kincaid Act of 1904 and the enlarged Homestead Act of 1909 followed. These actions flooded the Great Plains with novice farmers. Many late 19th and early 20th century settlers believed rain follows the plow. Emigrants, land speculators, politicians, and even some scientists believed that homesteading and agriculture would permanently change the semi-arid Great Plains environment to favor farming. Manifest destiny. Manifest destiny. The idea that Americans had a sacred duty to push west led to this misguided concept. A series of rainy years further confused the region's ecology and led to intense cultivation of increasingly marginal lands that couldn't be irrigated. Farmers plowed millions of acres of native grassland to sow wheat, maize, and other row crops in the 1910s and 1920s due to rising wheat prices and demand from Europe during World War I. Wheat prices fell as the U.S. entered the Great Depression. Desperate to produce a big crop and break even, farmers tore up additional grassland. In 1931, drought destroyed crops, revealing overplowed fields. The dirt blew away without deep-rooted grassland grasses. Erosion caused major dust storms and economic devastation, especially in the Southern Plains. When was the Dust Bowl? The Dust Bowl, also known as the Dirty 30s, started in 1930 and lasted for about a decade, but its long-term economic impacts on the region lingered much longer. Severe drought hit the Midwest and Southern Great Plains in 1930. Massive dust storms began in 1931. A series of drought years followed, further exacerbating the environmental disaster. By 1934, an estimated 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land had been rendered useless for farming, while another 125 million acres, an area roughly three-quarters the size of Texas, was rapidly losing its topsoil. Regular rainfall returned to the region by the end of 1939, bringing the Dust Bowl years to a close. The economic effects, however, persisted. Population declines in the worst-hit counties, where the agricultural value of the land failed to recover, continued well into the 1950s. Black blizzards strike America. Great Plains black blizzards swept the Dust Bowl. Some of these delivered topsoil from Texas and Oklahoma to Washington, D.C., and New York City, dusting Atlantic Ocean ships. Dust clouds covered the skies for days. Residents shoveled dust that drifted like snow. Dust penetrated even well-sealed homes, coating food, skin, and furniture. Dust pneumonia caused chest pain and trouble breathing in some persons. The condition's death toll is unknown. Hundreds to thousands are estimated. A 2-mile-high dust storm traveled 2,000 miles to the East Coast on May 11, 1934, obscuring the Statue of Liberty and the U.S. Capitol. Dust storms peaked on April 14, 1935. News named it Black Sunday. From the Oklahoma Panhandle, a dust storm swept east. Black Sunday blew off 3 million tons of Great Plains dirt. After the Black Sunday dust storm, the Associated Press coined Dust Bowl. New Deal programs. President Franklin D. Roosevelt established a number of measures to help alleviate the plight of poor and displaced farmers. He also addressed the environmental degradation that had led to the Dust Bowl in the first place. As part of Roosevelt's New Deal, Congress established the Soil Erosion Service and the Prairie States Forestry Project in 1935. These programs put local farmers to work planting trees as windbreaks on farms across the Great Plains. The Soil Erosion Service, now called the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, developed and promoted new farming techniques to combat the problem of soil erosion. Okie migration. Roughly 2.5 million people left the Dust Bowl states: Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma during the 1930s. It was one of the largest migrations in American history. Oklahoma alone lost 440,000 people to migration. Many of them, poverty-stricken, traveled west looking for work. From 1935 to 1940, roughly 250,000 Oklahoma migrants moved to California. A third settled in the state's agriculturally rich Sandwalken Valley. These Dust Bowl refugees were called Okies. Okies faced discrimination, menial labor, and pitiable wages upon reaching California. Many of them lived in shanty towns and tents along irrigation ditches. Okie soon became a term of disdain used to refer to any poor Dust Bowl migrant, regardless of their state of origin. Dust Bowl in arts and culture. The Dust Bowl, and the suffering endured by those who survived it, captured the hearts and imaginations of the nation's artists, musicians, and writers. John Steinbeck memorialized the plight of the Okies in his 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Photographer Dorothea Lange documented rural poverty with a series of photographs for FDR's Farm Securities Administration, and artist Alexander Hogue achieved renown with his Dust Bowl landscapes. Folk musician Woody Guthrie and his semi-autobiographical first album, Dust Bowl Ballads of 1940, told stories of economic hardship faced by Okies in California. Guthrie, an Oklahoma native, left his home state with thousands of others looking for work during the Dust Bowl.